WADR, promoting dialogue.
It is 6 p.m. in Dakar and Monrovia, 7 p.m. in Niamey. Good evening and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. First, our headlines. The death of a student convicted of exam malpractice in Guinea sparks public outrage.
He was seriously ill. We told the authorities to release him from prison so he could receive full treatment, but it was impossible. When they realized he wouldn't survive, they finally released him yesterday.
The UN warns against irregular migration amid latest disappearance or deaths of 144 migrants off Mauritanian coast. The Gambia's major opposition, United Democratic Party, questioned supplementary voter registration figures ahead of December elections.
How on earth can anyone take objection to any person who is ineligible to have his name entered on the voters list?
And Liberia records another cocaine bust valued at over $300 million, raising fresh concerns over regional drug trafficking networks. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Deborah Amour.
Thank you for joining us. We begin in Guinea, where the death of a 17-year-old student while in detention has sparked public outrage and renewed debate over the treatment of young offenders by the justice system. The student had been sentenced to 1 month in prison after being found guilty of cheating during the national high school examinations. His family says repeated requests for his provisional release to receive medical treatment were ignored. Augustine Bilkoli gives us the details in this report.
The incident occurred in Kinjia, about 135 kilometers from the Guinean capital Conakry. Mamadou Joma Bari, a final year secondary school student, was arrested while sitting the national baccalaureate examination after education authorities accused him of examination fraud. He was later convicted and sentenced to 1 month in prison. According to his family, Barit's health deteriorated rapidly during his detention. They say repeated requests for his provisional release so he could receive medical treatment were unsuccessful. He was eventually transferred to the regional hospital in Kinjia, where he died on Monday. His relatives accused the justice system of failing to ensure he received adequate medical care while in custody.
He was seriously ill. We told the authorities to release him from prison so he could receive full treatment, but it was impossible. When they realized he wouldn't survive, they finally released him yesterday. Empty promises and lies wouldn't bring us any relief. We just want justice for our comrade.
However, the public prosecutor at the Kinjia Court of First Instance has rejected those accusations.
Momodu was among those convicted of exam fraud. Unfortunately, he died from a condition known as rheumatism, but he did not die in prison.
Guinea's Minister of Pre-University Education, Alpha Bakabari, visited the bereaved family to convey the government's condolences. Meanwhile, calls for the resignation of both the Education Minister and the Kinjia public prosecutor have continued to spread on social media as public anger over the case grows.
Augustine Bilkoli with that report filed in by our Conakry correspondent, Tiano Alpha Ibrahima Balde. Senegal's ombudsman has urged the government to pursue a series of constitutional, judicial, and human rights reforms, including expanding citizens' ability to challenge laws in court and improving prison conditions. The recommendations presented to President Bassirou Diomaye Faye earlier today in the Ombudsman 2025 annual report come as the new administration continues efforts to strengthen democratic institutions and governance. President Faye welcomed the proposals and said the government would examine recommendations to broaden the Ombudsman mandate into a more powerful defender of rights institution, while also backing reforms aimed at modernizing public administration and strengthening the rule of law. Persistent piracy, illegal fishing, drug trafficking, and other forms of maritime crime continue to threaten security and international shipping in the Gulf of Guinea. one of the world's most strategically important maritime corridors. In response, the European Union and Portugal have donated patrol boats, forensic equipment, and specialized training to the Nigerian Navy as part of efforts to strengthen maritime security across the region. WADR's Abuja correspondent Yechenu Sasetu reports.
Receiving the equipment, the flag officer commanding Western Naval Command, Rear Admiral Abubakar Mustafa, said the donation would enhance the Navy's response to persistent and emerging threats in Nigeria's maritime domain.
These vessels would complement other tools for training maritime security operators, thereby improving our tactics, techniques, and procedure in different maritime security contingencies.
EU Ambassador to Nigeria and ECOWAS, Gautier Mignon, said the support reflects the European Union's commitment.
The Gulf of Guinea is one of the world's most strategic maritime regions, and keeping these waters safe is therefore not only a regional priority, it is also a shared international interest, and in particular for us in Europe, we have a direct interest in the security of the Gulf of Guinea.
The equipment is expected to support operations against piracy, illegal fishing, and drug trafficking, while the forensic tools will contribute to efforts to harmonize biometric data for crime investigation among security agencies. Captain Neves Rodriguez of the Portuguese Navy weighs in.
They are not merely boats, they are operational assets, further enabling Nigerian Navy to strengthen state authority at sea and to fulfill a simple but essential purpose: to prevent, to partner, and to protect.
The initiative forms part of a €15 million regional project benefiting 12 coastal member states of ECOWAS. The program also includes maintenance support, capacity building, and regional exercises involving participating countries and the Portuguese Navy. For WADR, Yechenu Sasetu in Abuja.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
The Gambia's main opposition party, United Democratic Party (UDP), has raised concerns over what it describes as unresolved discrepancies in the figures from the 2026 supplementary voter registration exercise. The Independent Electoral Commission (IEC) announced that over 200,000 people registered during the exercise. The UDP, however, says the data initially shared with political parties showed just under 180,000 registrations. The opposition party has called on the IEC to provide a full breakdown of the registration data. Rose Samara Cates gives us the details.
The UDP has written to the IEC requesting the total number of registrations before deletions and the number of duplicated entrances removed, the final register of verification, and the complete data set used in the process. The party is also calling for an extension of the scrutiny period, urging that political parties and citizens need sufficient time to examine the register and raise objections where necessary. Party leader Usainu Dabo explains.
We did not have any problem for the omissions because anyone who feels that your name was omitted could go to the IEC within 14 days and get your name inserted in the register. But we do have problem with the objections because if the complete list of voters is not published, how on earth can anyone take objection to any person who is ineligible to have his name entered on the voters list?
The Independent Electoral Commission is yet to respond publicly to the UDP's concerns. The party says its request is aimed at promoting transparency and strengthening confidence in the electoral process ahead of the December 2026 presidential election. For WADR, Rose Samara Cates, Banjul.
In Côte d'Ivoire, renewed tensions over the legacy of former President Laurent Gbagbo are reigniting debates about political reconciliation, justice, and the limits of political discourse in a country still shaped by the scars of its past crises. The controversy follows remarks by government spokesperson Amadou Coulibaly, who described Gbagbo in criminal terms while criticizing a political initiative by his party, the PPACI. His comments have been strongly condemned by the opposition. Imo Edet tells us more in this report.
The African People's Party (CODWA) PPACI has condemned remarks made by Communication Minister and government spokesperson Amadou Coulibaly targeting former President Laurent Gbagbo. The minister criticized the PPACI's proposed Social Pact, a political program promoted by Gbagbo, describing it as vague and lacking substance. He also referred to the former president as a criminal. Reacting to the comments, PPACI First Executive Vice President John Garvers Chedi accused the minister of making statements that were disrespectful and incompatible with the responsibility of a government official. The party argued that democratic debate should focus on policies and ideas rather than personal attacks, while stressing the need to respect the status of former heads of state. The PPACI also pointed to Laurent Gbagbo's acquittal by the International Criminal Court, where he had faced charges linked to post-election violence following Côte d'Ivoire's 2010 crisis. The party said continued references to him as a criminal disregard that judicial outcome and risk reopening divisions from the country's past. The exchange comes as Côte d'Ivoire continues to balance political reconciliation efforts with ongoing debates over accountability, justice, and the role of former leaders in national politics.
Imo Edet with that report. The United Nations has warned against the continued dangers faced by irregular migrants, particularly through perilous routes to Europe. The latest caution comes after at least 144 migrants died or went missing last week while attempting to cross the Atlantic Ocean to Europe. Their boat, which departed from the Gambia, ran out of fuel, leaving the migrants stranded at sea for nearly 25 days before being rescued. Only 38 survivors were found. Matthew Saltmarsh is the spokesperson of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR.
The refugees and migrants were reported dead or missing after attempting the perilous sea journey from West Africa towards Europe. And that, of course, highlights the continued human costs of these dangerous routes. Overall, 3 rescue and disembarkation operations were conducted between the 14th and the 18th of July in Nouadhibou, Mauritania. The survivors came from various different countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Passengers on one of the boats that was rescued on the 18th of July had experienced particular tragedy, with 143 people reported dead or missing and just 38 surviving after nearly 25 days stranded on the Atlantic, having left the Gambia to try to reach Spain. Among the survivors on that ship were 2 children who had lost all their family members during the journey and are now recovering in hospital with other survivors. Overall, this is a stark reminder that despite sustained efforts by coastal authorities and partners to save lives, the Atlantic route from West Africa to the Canary Islands remains one of the world's deadliest mixed movement corridors due to long distances, unpredictable ocean conditions, unseaworthy and overcrowded boats, and limited access to timely rescue.
Matthew Saltmarsh is the spokesperson of the UNHCR. Liberian authorities have seized what could be the country's largest ever haul of cocaine during a raid on a warehouse in Lower Margibi County. On Tuesday, joint security forces confiscated 3,971 kilograms of cocaine worth an estimated $318 million from a warehouse in the VOA community in Painesville. 2 foreign suspects with a firearm were also arrested during the operation. This comes just 6 weeks after a $19 million cocaine seizure at Roberts International Airport, raising fresh concerns over Liberia's growing role as a transit point for international drug trafficking. Liberia's Information Minister Geraldine Paya provides an update on the seizure.
The history of drugs in Liberia has an indication that those involved in drug business perhaps see our country as a place that they can use in getting over to their final destination they want to get. Our government has been keen on dealing with that. We've had a $19 million drug situation that everybody's talking about, something that is far below the 100 million that came year past through year and nobody was held accountable. There's been an attempt to politicize it. But whatever took place with that 19 million was just an indication that the individuals and security system that we have dealing with the drug situation were determined, committed, and we leave no stone unturned in tackling the drugs issue. So while that case is still on, Liberian security forces have just discovered what could amount to being the biggest drugs bust in our country. What that tells you is that the LDEA, the national security, and everyone involved in these businesses are working 24 hours around the clock to make sure that those who may use our country as a drug hub will not succeed.
Geraldine Mekpaya is Liberia's information minister. You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Death of student convicted of exam malpractice in Guinea sparks public outrage. The UN warns against irregular migration amid latest disappearance of 144 migrants off Mauritanian coast. The Gambia's major opposition, United Democratic Party, questions supplementary voter registration figures ahead of December elections. And still ahead in the news, African Union's Extraordinary Health Summit gets underway in Accra with calls for greater African investment in healthcare. We also have the guest interview and sports news coming up. Please stay with us.
Bringing you the facts beyond the headlines from Monrovia, Liberia. This is Abraham Parker. Stay tuned to WADR 94.9 FM, Dakar.
Thank you for staying with us. African leaders are being urged to reduce the continent's dependence on foreign aid and invest more in domestic healthcare systems. The call comes as government ministers meet in Ghana for the African Union's Extraordinary Health Summit. African governments are seeking to accelerate universal health coverage, reduce preventable maternal deaths, and strengthen health systems across the continent by 2030. Our Accra correspondent Nadede Tete reports.
Speaking at the African Union's Extraordinary Health Summit in Accra, Ghana's Health Minister Kwabena Mintah Kando said African countries must take greater responsibility for financing their own healthcare systems. He warned that the continent continues to bear a disproportionate share of the global burden of maternal mortality, accounting for nearly 70% of maternal deaths worldwide, despite many of these deaths being preventable.
When healthcare pushes families deeper into poverty, we cannot honestly claim we have achieved universal health coverage. We have simply shifted the burden from illness to death. A continent that finances its own health secures its own future. It cannot be held hostage to changing priorities beyond its shores. We must strengthen Africa's health sovereignty. Our continent continues to consume medicines, vaccines, and health technologies that are overwhelmingly produced elsewhere. The lessons of recent global crisis remain fresh in our mind. The next emergency must never again find Africa waiting at the back of the queue.
According to him, stronger investment in primary health care, including community health workers, clinics, and frontline medical facilities, is essential to achieving health sovereignty and universal health coverage. The summit has brought together health, finance, and foreign affairs ministers ahead of a meeting of African heads of states and government. Discussions are focusing on ending AIDS and tuberculosis by 2030, reducing preventable maternal and child deaths, expanding universal health coverage, and increasing domestic financing for healthcare. Leaders are also expected to adopt the Accra Declaration, a roadmap aimed at building stronger and more self-reliant health systems across Africa. For WADR, Nadede Tete, Accra.
We're still talking health. In Togo, malaria remains the leading cause of medical consultations, with health authorities reporting a rise in cases during the month of June. The increase has been linked to heavy rainfall, which has created favorable conditions for mosquito breeding, prompting the government to intensify prevention efforts through the free distribution of insecticide-treated mosquito nets. Usman Umar reports.
Togo is recording a resurgence of malaria cases, with the Plateaux region among the most affected areas, according to the latest climate and health bulletin from the National Meteorological Agency. The districts of Pele and Ago in the Plateau region recorded nearly 40 malaria cases per 1,000 inhabitants during June. Health authorities say the increase is linked to heavy rains recorded across several parts of the country during the start of the rainy season. Many localities received more than 100 millimeters of rainfall, while the capital, Lomé, recorded up to 422 millimeters, the highest level recorded during the period. As part of efforts to curb the spread of the disease, Togo has launched a nationwide campaign to distribute free insecticide-treated mosquito nets and insecticides. Following distributions in the Savannes, Central, Plateaux and Maritime regions, communities in the Kara region and Greater Lomé are expected to receive their mosquito nets from July 26. The campaign also includes awareness activities encouraging households to properly use the nets as a protection against mosquito bites, the main cause of malaria transmission. More than 5 million mosquito nets are expected to be distributed by the government with support from partners, including the World Health Organization.
Usman Umar with the details of that report that was filed in by our Togolese correspondent, Ida Bajo.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
In recent weeks, the African Union has condemned deadly attacks in Mali and Niger, while the United Nations launched an independent strategic review of the mandate of the United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel, UNOWAS. As regional and international actors reassess their approach to peace and security in West Africa, questions remain over what more can be done to address the growing threats. Our guest this evening is Adib Sani, a security and geopolitical analyst. In this interview, he provides a breakdown on the declining security situation, renewed terrorist attacks, political instability, and changing regional alliances in West Africa and the Central Sahel.
The region is dealing with a plethora of issues. They are socio-economic and geopolitical in nature, but the elephant in the room is got to do with the expansion of terrorism across the Sahel and towards coastal West Africa. Countries such as Togo, Benin, and even Ghana consistently being under threat, and the fear of further expansion towards the coastal areas. That is why it is important that we look at their strategy, because for years on end, the same strategy hasn't really provided the results we wanted, because according to the Global Terrorism Index, the region is responsible for 50% of all terrorist attacks globally. So what in essence this means is that our strategy has not been the best. That is why it is critical that these organizations really look at those strategies that we've deployed over the years and possibly come out with new strategies that would help, counter the threats.
Let's focus on the AES. These countries have taken a different part in their relations with regional and international organizations. How does this changing regional landscape affect security operations?
I've always indicated that our ability to fight terrorism effectively lies solely on how united we are. Through partnership, we'll be able to share better intelligence. We'll be able to collaborate with each other in a much more effective way. But if we are fractured, it becomes a very dicey situation. So I must say, the formation of the AES has left a huge vacuum in our effort towards, fighting terrorism. And the unfortunate thing also is the fact that most of the terrorist activities are based in these countries. And if we leave them to fight it alone, I don't think they are going to win. We are all going to be consumed, considering how closely knit we are as a sub-region and the probability of something happening in one country and spilling over into another. So it is a matter of grave concern.
We have seen a lot of condemnations, especially regarding the security challenges from the AU and other regional bodies. What should be done beyond the usual condemnations that we see when these things happen?
Well, we have to go beyond the condemnation we want to see real action on the ground. And the action is not all about militarization. We need to address those deep-seated socioeconomic and geopolitical deficits that makes terrorism thrive. Issues of internal insecurities. If you are dealing with bandits, if you are dealing with internal conflict, it creates an enabling environment for terrorists to move in. And there are a lot of examples to that effect.
All right, finally, are you hopeful that these assessments could change anything in the threats that West Africa and the Sahel is currently facing? Because we do know that the UNOWA's assessment is commissioned by the UN Security Council.
Some lessons can be learned from the past and be applied going into the future. So from the civil society point of view, I think the changes that should apply first is the need for local ownership of some of these threats. If we deal with it more from the outside rather than from the inside, it becomes difficult to deal with because they understand their environment. All they need is the support. Security, like I indicated, cannot rely solely on military responses. Then the issues of governance, justice, and economic development are integral to security. Then most importantly, early warning systems must lead to timely preventive action. And last but not the least, youth employment and community grievances must be addressed alongside security operations. That is the way to go.
Adib Sani is a security and geopolitical expert. It's time for our sports stories, and the Confederation of African Football (CAF) has officially accepted the joint declaration of interest by Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger to host the 2032 Africa Cup of Nations AFCON. The decision clears the way for the three Alliance of Sahel States AES members to proceed with the official bidding process. CAF confirmed that the joint bid meets the requirement for submitting a declaration of interest under its hosting regulations. The announcement followed a meeting in New York on July 18th between CAF President Patrice Motsepe and the presidents of the football federations of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger. And in tennis, Uganda's Joseph Sebatendira and Egypt's Zaina Aima Mohammed were crowned champions of the ITTF Hopes Week and Challenge Africa 2026, which concluded on July 19 in Accra, Ghana. The six-day event brought together 35 of Africa's top under-12 table tennis players from 15 countries, alongside 21 coaches as part of the International Table Tennis Federation's Talent Development Program. Nigeria's Ayola Umar Olawale finished runner-up in the boys' competition, while Elizabeth Emenike placed fourth in the girls' event. We've come to the end of Newslink at this time on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Ismaila Kamara for the technical assistance and Maudo Juf for streaming on YouTube and Facebook. You can download the WADR app on the App Store and the Google Play Store. My name is Deborah Amuwo. Good evening. We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Graft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.